Hello, LinkedIn friends, family, followers. Welcome back to yet another LinkedIn live stream. This is sort of an experiment I've been playing with. For those who are familiar, I had a video podcast called OneTAKE, and we did this about once every month. But because we're all stuck at home in this exciting and frightening new world, and because we've got the live stream capability, thought we would take OneTAKE live and do it over live stream over LinkedIn. Still getting used to the whole mechanics of it. It's like walking and chewing gum at the same time, so bear with me. But if you are just joining, please, in the comment field, share where you're joining us from. Feel free as we go through to share your questions. Before I get started, I just want to wish everybody who's out there listening health and safety. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. I hope you're taking care of your families, your loved ones, and your community. So without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce and welcome my next guest. And this is a conversation that we tried to have for many months, but he's very busy and I'm a little busy, but he's more busy. And so thrilled to welcome onto the show, Guy Kirkwood. Guy was a former colleague, is a current friend. We'll see if we're still friends by the end of this thing. And
yeah, good point.
Say it again, Guy.
Yeah, the good point. We'll see if we're still friends.
That's right. That's right. We could even put it up to a vote. People can decide, like, are they, was that an amicable ending, or did they just end it before they attacked them? So Guy's joining us from England. And so Guy, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've start with your background because you and I had the pleasure of working together a long time ago, and now you've got probably one of the cooler jobs out there that I want to delve into as we go through our chat.
Ian, first of all, thank you very much indeed for inviting me onto OneTAKE. I love the fact that the immediacy of live video, and it means that we can screw up live in front of everybody and still laugh about it. Well, hopefully laugh about it anyway. My background, I was talking to a journalist a couple of months ago, and they asked me about my career, and I laughed at them because I said I haven't had a career, I have a collection of jobs. Those collection of jobs have been, software company, university, then into did a couple of degrees, and then into publishing, and then barkingly decided to join the army. So served in the Scots Guards for 4 years, doing everything from sort of running around Belfast during the Troubles to changing the guard at Buckingham Palace, bearskin, sword, the works. That was good fun. And then fell into headhunting when I came out of the army. And the reason for that was that I was interested in tech and always have been. So I was actually going to go and work for SG Warburgs, which is part of a larger investment banking organization. And I thought, well, who knows about what happens in the market before anyone does? And I thought headhunters do, because you're hiring in anticipation of the need of the organization, if it's working properly anyway. And so I went to work for this guy called Roger Baker as a part-time researcher, just to learn what was happening. And his two first clients were KPMG and Perot Systems, which got me sort of interested in the outsourcing market. So I came into outsourcing, or BPO, business process outsourcing, right at the start of the market. So 20 odd years ago. And in fact, there's a guy called Mark Hodges, who now is chairman and chief exec of an organization called Acresis, which Ian knows quite well. And it's a very small world we live in. And he stood up in front of a whole load of IT outsourcing sales guys at a particularly shitty hotel in Heathrow, and said, "You guys have no idea that IT outsourcing is going to become less important, and business process outsourcing is going to be the thing." And I was sitting at the back of the room, and the look of sort of incomprehension on the faces of these of the audience, I knew that something was going to happen. So I got involved with that. worked with a number of the outsourcing service providers, and actually with Mark Hodges' business Equiterra at that time, and then ended up at an organisation where Ian and I worked together called Sutherland Global Services. The whole point about BPO is that it allows you to do more with people who generally in an offshore location. So if you think about the start of outsourcing, start of BPO, then someone sitting in Mumbai was a third of the cost of someone sitting in Michigan or Manchester or Munich. And that was a really impressive way of getting the work that was boring and mundane, that was not core, and allowed organizations to do that using external parties, the BPO providers. And it worked really well. In fact, it worked a little bit too well, because those organizations became, the TCSs, the Tata Consultancy Services, the Cognizants, the Infosys, and so on, became victims of their own success. So they ended up recruiting more and more people in their tier 1 cities, like Bangalore and Mumbai. And so they had to move to tier 2 cities because of attrition. And then they moved to tier 3 cities. And tier 3 city, by the way, I define the tier 3 city as having a university but no airport. So you can train people up, but they can't escape. I know I've sat on buses for 5 hours getting to these places. So the management control of that became more and more onerous. So wind forward to when Ian and I worked for Sutherland, we went to a technology business and said that we would outsource their order processing, because the system on which they operated was 20 years old, and they tried to change this 6 times over 20 years. But because it was so embedded in everything that the organization did, every time they tried to change anything, it fell over. So we were going to outsource the 1,000 people that were actually doing this role, this task. We said, okay, so we're going to consolidate into a shared service operation. We'll do Lean Six Sigma, process improvement. We'll consolidate into an offshore location. So we will be able to provide you good service for less money, better than what you've got at the moment. And the organization turned around and said, yeah, great idea. We've already done all of that. So Ian and David Brain and David Poole scratched our heads and realized that the only way as a BPO business that we could actually make any money doing this, because there was no fat in the business, was to actually automate. And so we went to see Blue Prism, or the team went to see Blue Prism in the UK, which was really the founder, and it wasn't really, but it was the founder of the robotic process automation market, RPA market. And then we went to see this small bunch of organizers, it was a small bunch of people, 7 people in an apartment block in Bucharest called Desktop. And the team realized that the software that this team, run by a guy called Daniel Dinez, had actually created could help in the automation of this outsourcing deal. And so that's what the team did. The results were so staggering, and I won't bother to go through them now, but the results were so amazing that I had that road to Damascus moment, and I know that Ian did too, and the team, that we realized that everything that we've been working on for the last 20 years was going to get blown out of the water by this automation stuff, because the value of this automation was so great. Right. So Ian and David and Pascal set up Symphony Ventures, which has now been acquired last year by SYKES. And I was approached by the original seed backers of Deskover, what became UiPath, to join as Chief Operating Officer. Stupid mistake, because I can't operate anything. But after about 6 months, Daniel and I sat down and over sushi, he likes sushi, and he said, this isn't working, is it? And I said, no, it's not working. He said, I asked him, what was it you expected me to do? He said, I expected you to magically run the business for me. I went, that's not me. So we came up with this job that I do now and have done since, which is Chief Evangelist. Now that role itself is actually based on the work that Guy Kawasaki did with Apple. So Steve Jobs asked Guy to sell and evangelize Apple products to everybody. His first thing that he said back to Steve was, yeah, we can do that for the agnostics. We can't do that for the zealots. We can't do that for the people that have already started using MS-DOS or Windows, because they won't sell that. Or won't buy that. So this role of chief evangelist is bi-directional. So it's outward facing, doing what I'm doing now, talking and spreading the word in a true evangelist style. But the most important part of my job is actually listening. So I spend more time listening than I do talking. And that listening is to our customers, to our partners, like SYKES and Simply Ventures, to the analyst community, and so on and so forth. Right. In which case I can feed that back into the organization, and we can stay agile. We can actually pivot when we need to, based on what we're hearing. So it's the best job, and everything that I've done is led up to this. But the worst job title, because I still have people on LinkedIn saying, say please that Jesus has entered your life, and I have to explain I'm not that type of evangelist.
Chief evangelist. It's okay, but as you say, and it's interesting. Thank you for the whole background, because as you identified, recruiters were sort of a bellwether of trends to come, and then you moved into you're sitting in a really unique location and position, just because as you listen and as you tell these stories to enterprises, and you work with analysts, and I want to get into sort of both those sides, I guess, leading up to this age of COVID we're in, and then actually brainstorm with you just what does it mean going forward. You have seen and been able to shape the trends that have influenced the way business is transforming. As you said, we used a global labor force to exact change, to drive innovation and efficiency, and now we've got these different tools, and we're all familiar, and you've been on stage many more times than I, telling the stories of robot out of people. You've got the narrative of augmentation of robots to enable people now. So you've seen it all. I'll pivot now, and first and foremost, actually, and so thank you for joining us. I hope you're able to evangelize from home. I hope that you're safe and staying healthy. Is that the case? Are you able to?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very fortunate to live in the country. So as we were chatting about before we went live, there were two types of people that knew that COVID-19 was going to be big. They were either financial analysts, because business analysts within financial services organizations, because they understand exponential growth. And the other was techies like us, because we've lived through or are living through exponential growth, where you see something gradually take for ages to grow, and then suddenly you see that hockey stick growth. So fortunately, we were able to stock up on horse food and dog food and toilet paper, of course, much earlier than running around supermarkets right now. But we are safe. In fact, it's possible that we may have already had COVID-19 and been asymptomatic. Looking at the epidemiology and so on, I was actually at an event in Oxford, and Fiona, my wife, went to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, and was completely surrounded by a group of Chinese tourists that were over. So it's possible that we've already had it, but we have a problem everywhere with testing or lack thereof. So until we get that sorted out, we don't know. Because if we have the antibodies, we should be damn well out there helping other people that haven't got it. And I firmly believe that the support of the health services is something that we absolutely need to do. Right. The sooner we can get that sorted out, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Now it's so I feel like I'm going to take a break for two reasons. One, just to say, if you've just joined us recently, please in the comment field share where you've joined us from, and please also contribute questions you have for me or for Guy. And the second reason I'm going to take a break is just to clarify that you're stockpiling horse food for a good reason. What is that reason?
because we have horses.
There we go.
Ian,
There was. You don't generally hear people are stockpiling hand sanitizer and toilet paper, and it's unique to be stockpiling horse food, but it's because of horse.
Well, we don't know when the shops are going to be open again, so it just makes sense. So, for everyone listening, there's never a stupid question. That was a stupid question.
That was helpful for the listeners. Come on, I know you've got horses, but I want to help everyone else who's wondering why on earth is Mr. Kirkwood stockpiling horse food. So it's a great point now. So we see enterprise, and I love the point of understanding exponential growth because it feels like some don't and don't realize that when a curve is going straight up, it coming straight back down is not necessarily very likely in the immediate term. And we're trying to look at that as it relates to a large global delivery operation. We've got this family that is our business, and you've got a large family that is your business. They are, by definition of the industries we're in, spread globally, and it has been it's been harrowing. It's been but fascinating to watch the Herculean efforts that have gone in to making sure that people are able to work from home and that they're able to be safe and able to now deal with this new normal, where you're in your flat and you're probably surrounded by your family in ways that were okay in the evenings, but not necessarily the easiest during the workday. So that's.
Yeah, I can see the wedge just on the other side of your
door
right. To stop children.
That's right. Got an entire family just leaning against the door trying to get in, and it'll break through. As soon as they do break through, that's when we cut and the show's over.
Exactly, precisely. Yeah. So it's like Attack of the Zombies, through the door. Daddy, we need to talk to you now.
They have this.
All joking aside, you can see organizations wrestling not only with the work from home issue, but also fundamentally questioning the way that they run their business. At the moment, absolutely, it's about keeping your people safe. Absolutely about that, and facilitating them in every way that they can. So, I mean, for instance, we've got Pilates and yoga sessions coming up on in the UK from our team, where not only us but also our families can join in and get involved in that. As I mentioned about the testing, as soon as the testing is there, and then we'll put together a sort of task force for helping people that aren't as fortunate as us, that are separated, that are isolated, and have to remain so, particularly those that have underlying health issues or who are older. These things are important to do, and it's important to do not just from a commercial standpoint, but it's also within the DNA of organizations, I think, that are going to survive and thrive post-crisis, that won't have because some organizations are getting it spectacularly wrong and will continue to do so. So it's almost as though we need to create, and in fact, I'm starting to work on this, an ethical framework by which our organizations, the markets in which we operate in an ethical way that actually improves the lives of the employees that work in that industry. Does that make sense?
No, that makes great sense, and I think I find myself talking a lot about this with colleagues. By the way, we had a tea time with my team yesterday that had dozens of people on from around the planet, and the only rule was we're not talking about work, and we spent time just listening to each other and hearing our respective stories about the realities that we're in. I mean, I've got staff now. I've got some folks who are stuck in countries that they don't live in because they can't get back home. Others who have the homeschooling challenges. Others that have have underlying health issues and need to stay where they are. So this is separating us, it's bringing the humanity out in all of us. And to your point, I think it really does make us look back at every organization and every operation and figure out how do we treat each other as humans, more so than perhaps we traditionally did.
Yeah.
Now it's
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
That if we look at post-crisis, and you're right, the line is going straight up at the moment. It's going to take a while to come down. I mean, it's going to be a classic bell curve, but it's reducing the height, or flattening the curve they talk about, right, as much as possible. Some countries are experimenting by not closing down. So Sweden being a good example, and in fact, the US being another. Whereas others have locked everything down. I mean, the UK at the moment, everything is locked down. Yeah. So you're allowed to walk the dog once a day, go out and exercise once a day. Otherwise, you're right. People are stuck in their apartments. They're stuck in their flats. They're stuck in their houses. And you're right that some families are separated as a result of that. And it's hard. Psychologically, it's hard. Yeah. So anything that organizations can do collectively to try and help that. I mean, there are some material things that say automation businesses are doing in terms of automating as much as they can for frontline health workers, right, so they're not doing administration work. They're actually spending time with patients. And there are several news stories out, not only for us but also for other automation organizations that are doing that, and that's great. But looking forward, whenever that might be, that new way of working, we talk about the future of work. Mm-hmm. The future of work has just got completely thrown out thrown out from what we were talking about even 4 or 5 months ago to what's the reality of post-COVID-19, and what does that mean? How are organizations going to structure themselves? Yeah. What impact is it going to have on their employees? How many people are going to want to continue to work from home? What are the facilitations that you need in order to do that? And the technology. And some organizations will do very well out of that. But we've got to be very careful, if you're a Zoom or a Slack, that you don't say, yeah, we're okay. The rest of the economy is done, but we're all right. Right. So that way of working has to have that ethical framework, I think. No. Because otherwise we're going to run into trouble. And in fact, to use your expression, you talk about process sediment. Corporate world, we want to get back to where we were before the virus, and we'll continue to build up that process sediment. Right. Digging through that and making sure that you're not accreting to that mess is something that we really need to think about now. Yeah. No, that's any way that I can contribute or be involved in that initiative of understanding what our responsibility is. I'd love to. Want to go to share where people are dialing in, and then want to ask you if you wouldn't mind sharing even one example of how you've seen your organization helping those frontline healthcare organizations through perhaps automating some mundane tasks. Yeah. So before we do that, I just wanted to greet folks from London, from Louisville, Kentucky, Dallas, McKinney, Texas, Indianapolis, Toronto, Orlando, Boston, India. Love the internet. This is fun. Berlin, Germany. We've got folks from New York, Memphis, Baltimore, London. I'm trying to figure out the time zone, guys, to figure out how we can get more of Europe dialed in too. We've got Florida. So thank you. Just means you're getting up early.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. But thankfully not as early as when I used to live in California.
Yeah, that's very true.
Right. So give us an example. Where have you seen automation helping in the fight against COVID?
Well, one of the ways, and this isn't about UiPath at all, actually, but it was actually one of our community that came up with the idea previously of using automation and computer vision to actually look at lung X-rays. So it wasn't developed for COVID-19, but it was repurposed for that, because you need to check out the lungs, particularly as he says coughing, as it creates pneumonia. So being able to identify pneumonia as fast as possible, as accurately as possible, required the human eyes, but actually with some artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computer vision, we were able to automate that, or one of our communities was able to automate that. Just this morning, actually, there was a piece in the one of the UK tabloids, Daily Mail, about the work that we and our partners are doing with a hospital in the Republic of Ireland in Dublin, and that was people can look it up. So that's more on the administration side. So it's making sure that, as I mentioned, that frontline staff are working with patients rather than filling in, the paperwork that they need to do,
right,
as well. So, and there are lots of examples, not just for us, because I want to make sure we're not, isn't UiPath wonderful, because we're not by any means, but there are other automation organizations that are doing this as well.
No, it's a tribute to the whole industry. I've seen in feeds just everyone rallying and really getting tenacious and pragmatic about, as you said, where can we just scrape out any of the inefficiency so as to take some of the load off of admittedly very, very burdened individuals right now as they work to keep us healthy.
Absolutely. And, the fact that is pro bono, it bloody well should be, anything that we can do to help.
Yeah. The other, and this is I'll pick up on a phrase that you've used quite often, but it's an interesting one you mentioned from a sort of a psychological standpoint. One of the trends in the RPA space began in UiPath and your evangelizing really put a lot of weight behind it, this robot for every person concept.
Yeah.
And now that a lot of those every persons are working in a much more solitary environment than they were used to, just because we've all been sent into quarantine to flatten the curve. Are you seeing ways that those robots for every person can be more than simply just administrative aids, but really digital twins and partners in that new future of work that you referenced?
Yeah, I mean, we're just all of the RPA vendors are going through the Gartner Magic Quadrant process at the moment, and we actually yesterday put in the videos on our demos and the business update, which was done by our CMO Bob Patrick, and he brought this up. So we think that okay, let's rewind a bit. In the late 70s, Bill Gates said that he thought that every household and every desk would ultimately have a computer, and he got laughed at. So we think that every worker is going to have their own robot. Partly what's known as unattended, to do the stuff that you never want to see again. It's that boring, mundane, repetitive stuff that RPA is really good at. But partly attended. And I think the attended is to help you to do the stuff that you do want to do. And by combining those, you're creating what is essentially, if you think back to the 70s and 80s, and yes, I am that old, you're looking at a secretary. So the traditional secretary that worked with you, providing you with administrative work, reducing your burden, allowing you to do more.
Right.
And this personal assistant, this secretary, will be an automated activity, will be an automated robot. The guy who's running that for us is a chap called Brandon Knott, who was a customer. And he joined it. He's now running all of our attended business. He and the team created, and some people may have already heard me talking about this, an early iteration of this. And because it involves a lot of different types of technologies in terms of natural language processing, natural language understanding, computer vision, document understanding, so on and so forth, all of these things that RPA is subsuming within them, it's got hyper automation. because it involves all of those, you could normally call it AI, not general AI, but artificial intelligence,
Sure.
as the tools necessary to get that to work properly. And for those who are old enough, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the AI in that was called HAL 9000. Unfortunately, HAL killed all the crew, so Brandon came up with the idea of creating PAL 9000. So which was our code name for it. So PAL is your friend, it won't kill you.
It sounds friendlier. Yeah.
Exactly, it helps. And
no red eye.
Exactly. So no red eye, exactly. And so PAL 9000 is this secretary, is this personal robot. Now we're not there yet, but we are combining a lot of the technologies that we're including in our platform to create this, and I think actually it will be accelerated as a result of the current crisis, because organizations with more remote workers need this type of activity and need the connection much more effectively than just piling everything onto a laptop and in terms of the applications that people have to use and let them crack on. So I think that glue effectively is a glue not only between the different technologies that sit within an organization, but also glue between the people of that and the employees of that organization.
Right. And as we said, I think that's it's always been important, but it sort of takes on a new light in the light of the events we're going through.
Yeah.
So I'll kick to some questions for a moment. Do you want to welcome folks who've also joined us from France, from Scotland, from United Arab Emirates, from Kenya. That's Lawi is a winner for distance. And so there's some questions that have come in. One, I think you'll like this guy. So this is from Sandeep Alexander Goni, who says, firstly, he's a huge fan of your leadership skills and a follower of your work. So he's glad to be able to join us in the live cast. His question's, how's your journey so far been with UiPath as an evangelist? And how do you see the market opening up with the new role of chief evangelist surfacing in companies dealing with emerging technologies? So is there a role more like you?
Yeah, exactly. I'll try and squeeze my head out of the door as I leave the room.
My last question will be really rude. It'll bring it back.
But that's a completely different reason than David Brain. David Brain has just massive head because he's full of brains. I'm not. Anyway, in joke, by the way, for anyone that knows anything about Symphony Ventures and SYKES. So the role of chief evangelist wasn't invented to sell. And I think that's really the most important thing. So I am not a sales resource. Throughout my career, throughout the jobs that I've done, I've also been doing demand generation. Now, the biggest mistake I made was to be part of the sales operation, because I thought sales was where the action was. And I either got fired or made redundant from every job I've ever had. Because every time there was a new sales leader, they'd come in, look down the list of all the people that they had reporting to them, and go, who's this person at the bottom here that's never sold anything? Yeah, that's me. Right, you're out. Yeah, exactly. See ya. So the role of evangelist is for demand generation. But actually, I spend much more time looking at RPA and the synergistic technologies, the surrounding technologies. It's what Alex Besser of WorkFusion called the Venn diagram, if you like, of different technologies that make up the automation market, rather than just focusing on UiPath. Because it's very easy to just talk about the organization that you work for, but actually there's no real value in that because we have other people that do that. By focusing on dealing with the analyst, and I'm sure we'll come to that in a second, it allows you a much broader view about what impact these type of technologies are having on not only organizations, but also on a societal basis. So we're looking at the demographics of countries, living and working in countries. And I've talked before about how the demographic time bomb in Japan went off in 2010. there is a material difference of working with these type of technologies and others on a country by country basis. So by understanding that and educating our partners and our customers to that, I think helps more than just me banging on about UI. And I'll be totally honest, if a Blue Prism have done a phenomenal job on something, I'm more than happy to say they've done a phenomenal job. In fact, I did so with their Jaguar Land Rover deal that they did with IBM. Amazing deal. So I'm quite happy to stand up and go, I'm evangelizing not only UiPath, but the entire category. And so when dealing with the analysts, we're now in a position where we're trusted, that they can have sensible conversations with us. And in fact, just before this call, I had an analyst from one of the analyst firms, I won't mention who it was, who called just for a chat. That isn't about briefings and inquiries. This is just looking at what they're doing and what we're doing collectively and how those come together. And that's a big difference. And that's really the role of the evangelist.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thanks, Sandeep, for the question, too.
Yeah, great question.
Let's go to there are a few different questions that get to the point of sort of the role of automation in this space and how it's changing. And maybe I'll try to kill two birds with one stone, because you are speaking to analysts now and sharing your perspective from your front row position of working with enterprises too. What's coming down the pike, and what are we going to do as we head into recovery, as we look at how to invest our resources? Does this mean more AI, more RPA? Does this mean a retrenchment to more domestic services in the outsourcing space, just because offshore struggled as much as onshore did with some of the quarantining challenges? What do you think is coming?
I do a series of predictions on an annual basis, and my predictions for this year, for 2020, number one was that there was going to be a downturn in the market. Yeah. And that was going to be good for RPA, not bad. Yeah. So we've got to be careful that we're not lumped in with those organizations that are going, goody, we're going to make lots of money out of this. Right. But I do think that the new way of working, the future of #future of work, we might as well just throw that out, what we were talking about recently, because there will be a fundamental change in the way that organizations structure themselves. The commute to and from work, if you don't have to, if you've got the technology necessary to avoid that, organizations will find that their employees just don't want to do that anymore. Right. And one of the other predictions was that the young, I don't talk about millennials, because of course millennials are now 30, but children at school that currently and students at university, including my two, they're going to force organizations to use more of the automation and AI tools, because the way that organizations have worked previously has just become an anathema. And I think that if you look at even the difference that Greta Thunberg has made in terms of climate change, right. Acceptance, right. There are still some people that don't accept that, but if you look at the acceptance, general acceptance, the fact that she's talking in front of the UN, that is not a symptom of her as an individual or about climate change. This is a symptom of the world changing because of the young. And I'm 53 years old. And if I can work that out, then other organizations and other people of my age and younger can work that out. Right. So that being said, we need to be in a position where we're facilitating that change. And the analysts recognize that, because they're now talking about their version of hyper-intelligent automation or intelligent automation or hyper-automation, or they all call it different things really, every about 360 degree, or inside out inside out organization or enterprise.
Right.
So all of these things talk about the same thing, which is what are the tools necessary to thrive and survive, first of all, and then thrive in this new world. And that I think are the tools that you and I and the community who's listening to this are working on.